Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be continuing on with the Declutter series. We are going to be looking at face palettes. There was a face palette by CoverGirl that I did already declutter that was in my blush declutter. We will be adding that one into the grand total of this one, so that's already one for the declutter. By Terry Compact Expert, Dual Powder, and I have the shade number 4, Beige Nude. If I'm not mistaken, this was already discontinued. I thought this would be a really lovely subtle contour product. You have a darker shade on the perimeter. It's a little warm, but it's almost like a neutral warm color. The highlight shade is just a really beautiful neutral champagne shade. By Terry will be kept. Kevin Aquan. The contour duo, which includes the sculpting powder in medium and the celestial powder in the shade Candlelight. Contour shade in here. So this is the sculpting powder in medium, Candlelight powder. Now I'm into a dilemma where I love the shade of the Kevin Aquan for the contour, but I prefer the shade in the By Terry Compact. They're quite similar in their function. The shades are similar. I feel like the By Terry might be a little too warm. So you know what? Let's just be cutthroat because I have too much product to use up realistically. I'll keep the Kevin Aquan and then I will declutter the By Terry. This is from Kat Von D, which is now known as KVD Beauty. This is the Shade and Light Contour Duo. I believe this is like the Kitten Duo or something, but this includes the shade Lucid and Sombre. Lighter shade, which is called Lucid, and then we have Sombre, which is the contouring powder. I need to be realistic. I don't contour very often, and when I do, I tend to reach for a cream product. I don't know if I need all of them. Charlotte Tilbury Film Star Bronze and Glow Face Sculpting and Highlighting Palette, and I have the shade Fair Medium. You have the Sculpt powder, which is almost like a bronzing powder. Why don't I reach for this more often? Oh, that's really pretty. That's like a slightly more kind of like peachy color. And then you have the highlight, a little bit warmer than I go for. Not quite as warm though as the Kevin Aquan. I feel like I would use this a lot more for travel. I'm going to hang on to the KVD and the Charlotte Tilbury, and I'll declutter the By Terry and the Kevin Aquan. Jaclyn Cosmetics Bronze and Blushing Duo. I have the combination Lilac Love and Top Tan. Lilac Love. That is such a beautiful, cool toned lilac-y pink color. Top Tan. A little bit warmer than I go to. It's more of like a pale, peachy bronzer, although it's not pulling too yellow and it's not too red. Yeah, I'm definitely keeping this. Bobbi Brown Face and Cheek Palette. This is the shade Light, the bronzing powder. A little bit darker and warmer than the Jaclyn Hill Nude Peach Blush. It's a warmer peachy tone than I typically reach for. It's very, very pretty and it doesn't pull too orange on the skin. Illuminating bronzer. I like using it for under my blush or kind of like using it over the blush as a blush topper. I really enjoy this. I'm gonna hang on to it because it's beautiful. IT Cosmetics Confidence in Your Glow, and I have the shade Instant Nude Glow. Let's watch our way from light to dark. So we'll start with the highlight, the blush, and the bronzer. Then I'll kind of mix it all together. Whether I mix them all together or use them as individuals, it's just very, very warm. I can make it work, but it's one of those products I don't love enough to make it work. I just feel like this is a product that I could pass on to one of my friends, so I will be decluttering the IT Cosmetics Confidence in Your Glow. Also, from IT Cosmetics, I have the Your Je ne sais quoi face palette. The Bye Bye Pores blush in the shade Je ne sais quoi, Sunshine in a Compact Bronzer, Perfect Light Luminizer, and Je ne sais quoi. I'm going to hang on to this palette. Now that we are able to travel again, I feel like this will get a lot more use. Too Faced Natural Face Palette. The top highlight shade, which is called Starlight. Satin Sheets. Pink Wink, Pink Sand, which is a little bit more muted, Sunny Honey Bronzer, Tropic Like It's Hot Bronzer. Oh, that has a little bit of a shimmer to it. I feel like I know why I don't reach for it, because the colors really aren't for me. Of all the colors, the only ones that really jump out to me are the two blush shades. I have a zillion blushes that I'm keeping this tone, and then I have one hot pink blush because I don't reach for hot pink blush in my daily life. I know I won't use it. I'm going to declutter this. Hourglass Ambient Lighting Palette. This is the Universe palette. This really, really made me sad. The Hourglass ambient lighting palettes, they've been coming out for the last 5 or 6 years now, and the last 2 or 3 years now, they've been releasing a lighter palette and then a darker palette, which they call the Unlocked palette. Universe setting powder. It swatches well, but when I put it all over my face to kind of set or buff, it darkens my skin tone way, way, way too much. And it just makes me look a little muddy. Blush in the shade Vibrant Heat. Very, very beautiful shade. This was, for me, the standout shade in the palette. I love it. This blush has a lot more of a base color to it than my other Hourglass blushes. We are going to go into the shade, which is another blush called Luminous Rose. This is a pretty shade. It's just too warm. The gold sparkle really shows up on my cheeks. And it's just a color I don't love for my skin tone. This is a shade that if I was wearing a fake tanner, I could use it. But I really, like I've mentioned in other declutter videos, I don't wear a lot of fake tan. So this shade just really isn't one that works for me. Bronzer shade, which is called Glistening Bronze Light. The bronzer shade in this isn't bad. When I apply it to my skin, it just pulls a little too warm and it looks like a stripe on my skin. Super natural ambient strobe lighting powder. So this is the highlighter for the palette. For me, this is not workable as a highlight. It's too dark, too golden, and it just shows up once again like a stripe on my skin. I could get away with using the strobe lighting powder as a very subtle highlight. If I want a really strong statement blush, I could use the more pinky blush. The other blush is too warm for me. The bronzer's too warm for me. The highlight's too dark for me. Since I posted my review for this, I've had some very interesting comments and then some DMs on Instagram saying that I didn't use the palette correctly, yada, yada, yada. But then recently I had someone who commented on the video that they bought this because of my review and it works really, really well for them. So that is something great to keep in mind. Just because a palette or any makeup product doesn't work for me in my skin tone doesn't mean it won't work for someone else. There is nothing wrong with this palette. It is beautiful. The shades are just not the best matches for me. I feel like if I was a little bit darker, it would work for me. My mom, she has a darker skin tone than I do. She's also slightly warmer in her undertones than I am. So I'm gonna give this to my mom. Decluttering the Hourglass palette, which is a shame because this is expensive and I'm just giving it away to my mom, but it's my mom. I love my mom, so I think she will love this. Too Faced Cocoa Contour Palette. This is a palette that includes 6 shades. So you have a highlight shade for light, medium, and deep skin. Then you have a contour shade for light, medium, and deep skin. I don't use these 4 powders. If I was still working as a freelance makeup artist, this would be a great tool because the textures are beautiful. Only shades I reach for are the light highlight shade. Barely shows up on my skin, which is really nice because you could use this as almost like a brightening powder to brighten up under the eyes. I like the light contour powder. It's a really nice one. It's not too cool. It's not too warm. If I didn't have other contouring products in my collection, I would hang on to this. MAC Studio Fix Sculpt and Shape Contour Palette, which includes 3 highlight powders and 3 sculpting or contouring products. The only shades I reach for are Emphasize, which is a highlighting powder, which is stunning. It's one of the few powders that is light enough for my skin tone to be used as a subtle, more satiny highlight. The shade Taupe. Like a warm reddy color. I don't love taupe for contouring. I like it more as a kind of bronzing powder. Bone Beige is a little bit more reddy pink, which is really nice for a bronzing powder. The only shades I don't use are Cream and Accentuate, just because they don't really work for my skin tone. I have bronzers in my collection that I can dupe these products out for. I am going to be decluttering this one, the Natasha Denona Diamond and Blush palette. I have the lighter shade called Daria. I love this palette so much. I'm pretty sure this has been discontinued, so I did not spend much on this palette. I think I got it for about $40 when it retailed for originally like $100. And I wanted this palette when it came out, but when this palette launched, Natasha Denona wasn't in my budget. budget because Natasha Denona is more of a luxury brand and I couldn't afford stuff like this. So when this went on sale, I bought it and I do really enjoy this. The cream highlighter, really beautiful. This is such a soft highlighting formula. You can build it up to be a little bit more intense. It is slightly warmer, but it does have a translucency to it that makes it workable for kind of cooler skin tones. Then we have a cream blush, which is so gorgeous and slippy. It's a beautiful warm pink, nearly identical to the Natasha Denona Puff Paint, which is like a liquid whipped blush in the shade Daria. I didn't personally care for that formula, but I do love this shade. And then we have a Duo Glow powder, which is this purpley shade up top. I love that you have the more cool violet-y tone mixed with this slightly rose goldy kind of shift to it, which makes it very workable for warm, cool, and neutral undertones. This is definitely more of like a party shade in my book. Diamond Powder, which is down here in the bottom left corner. This is a fascinating product because it's a powder, but it almost feels wet to the touch. I tried this once as a highlight, did not enjoy it at all because it is pretty much like a glitter bomb, but used on the inner corner of the eyes or as a lid topper, it is beautiful. It's really, really pretty. So now we have our powder blush. It looks a little bit more matte and pan, but it has a very subtle light reflex to it. It's almost like a luminous satin finish. Very, very nice blush. And I like topping the cream blush with this to give it a little bit more dimension. Glow Extreme powder, which is also very, very beautiful. It's very nice. It's a little bling bling for my personal taste, but I am more likely to gravitate for this versus this as a cheek highlight. Even though this might be discontinued, this was my very first Natasha Denona product, and it's the first product that Natasha Denona released that really stood out to me. So I'm gonna hang on to this for nostalgia because I love it so, so much. Last but not least, we have the Sydney Grace palette, which is newer to my collection. I am not gonna part with it. This is basically an empty palette that you fill with your own products. The first shade is a highlight called Down the Aisle. This is a really beautiful, slightly warm champagne shade. It's one of the shades that just really melts into the skin. It is stunning. Pink Mist, a really beautiful, slightly cooler toned. It's one of those ones that looks white, but it has a very kind of icy finish. This is very much what I would call like a nice wintry highlight. It has this beautiful kind of lilac-y tone. When you apply this to the cheek and then apply a really nice bright pink blush, it just really gives you that kind of winter flush look to the skin. PSL Extra Whip. Totally honest, I bought this for the name because I do love a good pumpkin spice latte. Here are the 3 Sydney Grace highlighters in the palette. So Down the Aisle, Pink Mist, and PSL Extra Whip. Love all 3 of these shades. They're really beautiful. And I tend to use this more as a blush topper on top of a very, very, very cool toned pink, something like the Dior Backstage Rosy Glow blush, because it helps to neutralize the coolness a little bit. The other 3 shades in this palette are all blushes. So the first one is called Mauve Delight, which is almost like Hourglass Ambient Light Blusher in the shade Mood Exposure. It just has a little bit more body. It has a much more intense base shade, but it's still that really beautiful kind of murky, slightly muted out mauve shade that I love. Secret Blush, really, really beautiful shade. I absolutely love the shade. It has a little bit more light reflection than I normally go for in a blush, but it is one of the smoothest blushes I've ever used. When you swatch with your finger, it feels like butter. The final shade in the palette is this blush called Time Stops. Very similar to Mauve Delight. Mauve Delight is a little bit more muted, where Time Stops is a little bit more bright, and it's also a fraction more true and blue in its undertone. Keeping my Sydney Grace palette. So I started off with 15, I'm keeping 7, and I'm decluttering 8. The one that you did not see on camera was the CoverGirl Serving Sculpt palette in the shade Bloom Babe. That is featured though in my powder blush declutter. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all on the next video where we are decluttering eyeshadow palettes. That is going to be a fun one, so I will see you all there.